In the annals of time, riding social forces as they crest and crash onto the shores of history, some would-be heroes stumble but manage to recover their breath. Others are reduced to the flotsam and jetsam of nostalgia. These others are our subjects. They are the vanquished, 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 vanquished.
Hello and welcome to The Vanquished. Anders J. Lee here with my trusty co-host, Freddie G. And we are joined by a guest from across the country, from sunny Los Angeles, Emil Derosa.
Hi, how's it going? Thanks for having me.
Emil is co-host of the Ben and Emil Show and a student of the ruling class of the trillionaire mindset.
Yes.
Which is why I wanted to have him on today to investigate someone who's not quite a trillionaire. I don't know if we have any trillionaires yet, but he certainly has tried to become one, and that is Steve Forbes. What does it take to become a trillionaire?
Oh, I think you got to be a sicko, honestly. I'm excited to talk about this guy. It's you guys have done your research on this guy. I was not, to quote Shaq, super familiar with his game, but he's. I'm always talking about this on our show. We talk about billionaires a lot, and it really takes like a sick individual. I think if I had anywhere remotely near the money and resources these people had, you'd never hear from me again. You know what I mean? Every day I'm just kind of like astonished watching Bill Ackerman just kind of trot his ass out there to get slapped on Twitter, and it's just like, just go away, man. I don't understand where you have the energy to do this, and you're going to drag your wife into this. It's really sicko shit.
That is a good point. I wonder how many of them just don't have any sort of public presence at all. It seems like there's like a hardcore of them who just need the ego to be massaged, including presidential candidates like Steve Forbes. Even though he had it made, he needed to really stick his neck out and run for president. But I'll say my first exposure to Steve Forbes I have because I am a sicko in a kind of a different way. I had a weird obsession with the 1996 presidential election as a kid, and he was one of the candidates. It is the most boring election, probably the least consequential election in American history. Every election is the most important. This was, I would say, the least important, which is why it's fascinating to dive into. I'm sure we will return with another subject. But Fred, what was your first exposure to Mr. Forbes?
I do want to first say, if Steve Forbes had been able to implement the flat tax back in 1996 with a 0% capital gains, we would now have trillionaires. So this election, very little consequence, but Steve Forbes could have gotten us to the trillionaire level. Okay, so it's 1995. I'm 12. I don't like Bill Clinton. It's unclear why. And then this flat tax thing. Steve Forbes coming up with a flat tax. It sounds like really simple. It's very good if you're 12 and like kind of centrist. It's like, oh, that's so simple and fair. So Steve Forbes, I guess Ross Perot was the first presidential candidate I ever supported for like a month, but Steve Forbes was the second one. I did love Steve Forbes for like a month. And now that I know everything about him, I don't love him as much.
Wait, can I ask how old you guys are?
I'm 33.
I'm 40.
33 and 40. Okay, yeah. Because for me, the 1996 election, I think it's the first election I remember experiencing.
Same.
I'm 34. Yeah. And I remember kind of, I don't think I had any real feelings about it. I just kind of remember at school, they kind of were like Bob Dole or Bill Clinton. And that's like my first, that's the first kind of, 96 is the first time I knew politics was a thing.
Yeah, that's the same with me. And I found out recently that that's actually not. So originally, when I was like a teenager, I would read books about it, and it was kind of obsessed with it, and be sent to like doctors, like there's something wrong with this kid, he's on the spectrum or something. And then I saw a therapist more recently who was like, your first exposure to the outside world, like to whatever's happening in current events, has like a formative effect on your mind. And so it's very common to like whatever the random first historical event you witness or remember, that becomes kind of like a mark in your memory from then on.
The nice thing me and Anders realized was recently is I'm exactly 2 presidential election cycles older than Anders because I'm turning 41 this year. He just turned 33. So we got that in common. Yeah, for me, 88 is like your 96. And by 96, yeah, I was ready. I was 13 years old. I was on the Bob Dole debate team at school. It was a Jewish school in New York, so we only convinced one other person to vote for Bob Dole. And I walked away from a car accident where my dad's car was totaled to make sure I participated in that debate. And we'll talk more about that in the Dole episode. But yeah. So this election was very, very formative for me. But yeah, for their month, I don't know what month it was, but for some month in 1995, I was all into Steve Forbes.
Wow, you and the billionaire candidates somehow. I guess there's a alternate reality where you don't go into comedy, and Freddie G. I guess that would still be your name, maybe as a politician. I like thinking that you would be a billionaire running for president right now.
The guy who helps rich people.
Were your parents somehow kind of like into Steve Forbes, or was this completely independent?
This was me, yeah. So there was a vibe with me and my dad. My dad was a hippie, and there was at some point in the 90s an Alex P. Keaton vibe from That's Michael J. Fox on Family Test for you youngins.
Yeah.
Where I was like more Republican and he was more of a hippie.
It was your way of rebelling.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, like my dad smoked a lot, so he made it look uncool, so I've almost never smoked.
Right.
Wow. Well, speaking of dads and families, Steve Forbes is, to be clear, not a self-made man, not a self-made billionaire. He is an heir, really, to the Forbes fortune. Fred, you did a little digging into this family and how they made their riches.
Okay, we're going medieval. Okay, so they go back. The Forbes clan goes all the way back to medieval Scotland. And even like basically just some guys in Scotland were better on horseback and they were knights and they just took property from everybody else. And he dates all the way back to that. Basically, so Macbeth, the play is fictional. It's also bad luck to say, but Macbeth, so this podcast is now cursed as per my wife who's in theater. So it goes back to the days of the real Macbeth, that he is a real person. And at the end of the play Macbeth, when Macbeth dies, the guy who becomes king is named Malcolm. And Malcolm is Steve Forbes' actual first name. So he dates back to medieval Scotland. That's how long this wealth goes back, almost 1,000 years.
I wonder how much of American wealth you can trace back to, guys on those isles who were just better at riding horses than some other guys.
Way too much.
Yeah, we like to think that everybody came here in poverty and then made it, but there's a lot of long-standing wealth that came over on the Mayflower and other ships at that point. But you discovered that, Fred, that Steve Forbes is actually related to another member of the Vanquished who I just saw today, and I'm not making this up. This is breaking news. May actually, he's being thrown around as a contender possibly to replace Biden, but John Kerry.
Yes, John Kerry. His middle name is Forbes, John Forbes Kerry. He didn't play it up a lot because he already had the Hines connection. But yeah, they're very distant cousins, but John Forbes Kerry actually descends from like the better line of this clan. And I did, I don't think
What makes them better?
They seem to be the main line. Steve Forbes, you have to like look up that BC Forbes. I think the BC Forbes, who was his ancestor who moved to America, is kind of an outcast from that clan.
Okay. Well, interesting.
But yeah, you can see the family. Oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
And John Kerry is from the better clan.
Yeah, John Kerry's from the main line. BC was kind of like I think maybe like some kind of weird stepchild or something. I forgot the details. But yeah, so John Kerry is part of the even better part of that clan.
That makes sense. I mean, just look at the two of them, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah, Kerry really does. Handsome. I mean, Kerry, he at this point looks like he's just, chock full of plastic surgery and Botox. But like at a certain point, his head is too big. It looks weird. And he's also very tall. And that works great if you're a knight. And I think that's probably what he's meant to be doing right now is jousting somebody.
So yeah, let me explain. Okay. So basically there's a member of the British Vanquished named Bonnie Prince Charlie, who tried to take the throne back after the revolution of William and Mary. And Steve Forbes descends from a guy who was a knight in that army. So they got stripped of their nobility. and eventually ended up, coming to America and starting a finance magazine. But that's
I
why.
love that.
Yeah.
Vanquished or fallen nobility coming to America with a chip on their shoulder. It's a tale as old as time.
Yeah. And Bonnie that just means like good old boy, like good old Prince, right? Bonnie, because that I only know that because of the musician Bonnie Prince Billy.
That sounds right. And yeah, basically he's the Duke of York, the guy who New York's named after, gets thrown out by the Revolution of William and Mary. And then his son is still around, and his son was kind of the reason the whole thing happened. And at some point he tries to come back and take stuff, but it's a complete failure.
So how does this magazine start?
Oh, okay. Yeah. So yeah, a couple hundred years later. Yeah. He's a writer. BC Forbes had come over. He came from Scotland, and he's a writer for the Hearst magazine. He's like, I'm going to start my own financial magazine, and it's called Forbes, devoted to doers and doings. And the motto was, with all thy getting, get understanding. So it's sort of like a little bit of like, we're rich, but we're wise. And it is weird because Scottish Presbyterians are probably not too pro-wealth, but it's a very pro-wealth magazine.
Interesting.
And what year is this that it kicks off?
Magazine kicks off. I don't know why I didn't write that. I'll say I think it's 1917. Yeah.
Okay, so it's within the 20th century. You have kind of the beginnings of a new world order.
Oh yeah.
I'm curious how different it was when it started. My only exposure to it is it's where you can go to look up the richest guy in the world. I feel like they're constantly releasing who the top 10 guys are. And then there's they do the list of like young people to watch, the top 30 under 30, the guys who are going to do financial crimes in the next 5 to 10 years. That's my only exposure with it.
So yeah, I wasn't able to find articles from back then, but starts in 1917. Probably a weird time to start a financial magazine because there's immediately America joins World War I, and then there is like a really bad financial times right after World War I that everyone forgets about because it turned around in the 20s.
Interesting. But I understand Steve Forbes' dad, Malcolm, takes over the magazine, right, and is a Fabergé egg collector.
Yeah, so he's Malcolm's amazing. And it's a few sources confirm this. He's closeted gay, has big parties, very lavish. Like I said, collects the eggs, collects hot air balloons, collects Harleys as well. And he likes to name things. His motorcycle club and I believe his yacht or his plane are called the Capitalist Tool. So he's basically the Donald Trump of his day, honestly. Like the most
I feel like
billionaire.
If we turn this in, Hollywood execs would give it back and say this character's overwritten. This is too much.
Yeah,
he would be amazing. Yeah, he honestly would be. Yeah, an amazing movie. Malcolm. Steve Forbes would not be a great movie, though. We did find some interesting stuff about him.
Yeah.
Let's see. Oh yeah. Okay. So he'd have big birthday. His birthday party was like a big lavish event every year, and one year every guest got an engraved Rolex, which seems amazing, but might be somewhat normal in that world.
Wow, how many guests is that? Jesus. So him being gay comes up a lot. That was kind of like an open secret, and Steve Forbes would sometimes have to answer questions about it. There's an instance I dug up from 1996 where he's talking to reporters, and Steve says, "Ask me anything, any question." And one of the reporters says, "What about your father's ellipses personal life?" And some of the other reporters expect Steve to be like really offended and taken aback that somebody would, use such a low blow. And then he says, without missing a beat, just like robotically says, "My father is dead. I'll answer any questions about me," and just moves right on. So I'm not sure how he felt about his father's sexuality, but he learned to deflect speculation about it very quickly.
That could have honestly been, if that happened in the debate, could have been like his Dukakis, what if your wife was raped moment. Like that would have seemed so weird. And the thing with his dad is so basically, I think it's an open secret, but it comes out pretty publicly in 1990 after his dad dies.
I mean, also 1996, like kind of a campaign breaker right there. The gay dad. I don't know. That's enough to get you. You got to drop out. It's a different time.
Yeah, there's defensive marriages being passed, and the Republican the primary debates I watch. I mean, they're pretty conservative. They're more talking about stuff like abortion,
Republican
but they're
side
not.
Too. I mean,
these debates are insane. Steve Forbes is by far the most liberal on social issues, and he's still really bad.
Yeah, but and also too, like from what I mean, you can tell me how accurate this is, Fred. But I think I saw something that said it wasn't just that he was gay. There's obviously nothing wrong with that, but he would make advances towards young men in like the Forbes magazine mailroom. So he would try to abuse his position of power to get Dome.
I mean, that sounds like believable just because corrupt rich, like basically he's kind of like a Spacey like figure, I guess. So yeah, it didn't come out anything because my source a lot are like reading Steve Forbes's book. So it's a lot about the gold standard and not so much about his dad's tryst. I did talk to a couple of people who used to know Steve, who used to work at Forbes, but they didn't work there back when Malcolm was allegedly hanging around the mailroom. So yeah,
you're telling me Steve's books didn't have a lot about his dad's going on in the mailroom at Forbes.
Oh god, no. The weird thing with Steve is like there's nothing about his nothing in anything you watch. He never mentions his wife at all, like not in the debates. And I had to Google her. I did find her art website. But there's like he's very impersonal. Like? Oh yeah, it's in the we should share this doc with Emil, but yeah, it's on the bottom of this doc. She has a bad art website. And I took a screenshot of it. Yeah, it's pretty bad because remember again, they're very rich. So this website costs like $100. It's real. It's a real bad website. Yeah. If Steve Forbes is listening, come on and defend your wife's art.
This looks kind of like Lisa Frank, but with kind of a bit more shishi, I guess. Definitely looks very 90s. I don't know how current she keeps it. Maybe she quit, but one of these pictures is kind of cool.
Which one? The dog?
I would say the woman with the green hair. Dog is a bit cringe in my opinion, but
I'm actually a fan of sea songs, and that's just my personal opinion.
Yes, sea songs is not. It's like a stained glass window essentially that she drew.
Yeah, I find it calming.
Yeah. It is. I guess the symbiosis of the ocean and sailing is what the description says. So it accomplishes that.
I actually like the individual pieces. I like a lot of art, but the website, it's just a very poorly made website. That's for a billionaire's wife.
Yeah. Was he like, you're on your own? It's the free market for your art career, I guess.
That's a good point. He did not. She's picking herself by her bootstraps, but they're very small bootstraps.
Right at the Forbes household.
Yeah. So Malcolm Forbes, he was a politician himself, though, right?
Yeah, he's a state senator in New Jersey. Yeah, this is another. And then he runs for governor, and he's vanquished twice. So similar to Mitt Romney, this guy has vanquishment in his blood.
Oh, that was one thing I do want to mention. I was looking up Steve Forbes a little bit. I did not know these were Jersey boys. I'm a Jersey boy myself, so I do have to give Steve Forbes that.
No matter how rich Steve got, he stayed in New Jersey. As far as I can see, he's lived in New Jersey his entire life.
All right, I respect that.
His dad is in the New Jersey Hall of Fame. He got it in 1980. Really, yeah. Must have been a great moment for the family.
He does have a slight accent you can hear, even though he's upper crust rich guy. There's still a tinge of Jersey in his speech. What part of Jersey are you from, Emil?
I grew up in. People say it doesn't exist, but it's very real. Central Jersey. Everyone wants to talk about North.
I've done a gig
Jersey.
there.
Central Jersey is very real. Kind of by the shore, near Asbury Park is what a lot of people know.
Oh yeah, it's real.
Yeah.
Okay. And is that where Steve lives? It's in like what, Princeton or something?
I'm trying to remember. He went to Princeton. I feel like he's Northern Jersey because he's like a rich guy.
Yeah,
And
I bet
he's
he's Northern Jersey.
Yeah, he's not
There's a lot of money
Yeah.
up there. You're close to the city.
Is
Right.
Edison Central Jersey?
Edison, yeah, kind of.
Just because that's where that's where like the light bulb, like this, that like that, we're all relying on you guys, because Edison and the light bulb and all that.
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, and it makes sense that he's close to New York and the Forbes office. But so apparently was interesting. Malcolm's middle name is Stevenson, and Steve, his full name is Steve Forbes Jr. And the Steve isn't short for Stephen; it's short for Stevenson, which is a very weird aristocratic flourish that I would expect, a freakish billionaire family to have to do something like that.
Yeah,
Naming
he's
it. Go ahead.
Oh yeah, so like a Steven, they're like relatable guys you could have a beer with, but Stevenson sounds like a rich guy who never touched the car door handle.
Yeah, to name your son after your middle name and then shorten it is just such a weird. My son would be named Jam, I guess, after James. But they, as you said, they lived in New Jersey their whole lives. And so I read a bit of Losers, which is a great sort of account of the 1996 campaign written by Michael Lewis. And the reason it's so good is because, again, it's such a boring election that he really has to mine things to make interesting. And he just kind of like, was satirizing the whole thing in a way. But he says of Steve Forbes that he is like the quintessential WASP, and there's no getting around the fact that Forbes looks and acts like the sort of person who should know all about economics. He calls to mind the WASP dad. The only subject on which you can even imagine having an intimate conversation with him is money. And as a result, when talking about money, you are often talking about something else. So that's the only thing he can talk about personally. That definitely tracks with the videos I've seen of Steve Forbes. He's just very one note. He's obsessed with money. It's like a Scrooge McDuck situation, probably.
Jesus, it's pathological for this guy.
Yeah.
What a boring loser. Every time you talk to this guy, you just got to hear about fucking money. He's got a whole magazine about it too. It's like he can't get it out all day.
Yeah,
he's clocking in at Forbes, talking money. He's got to come home.
He probably has opinions on like the mint and the different like design, the different signatures of the different treasury secretaries on different bills, and like keeps track of the designs that are coming up. At least he'd be able to like suss out a counterfeit bill pretty easily, I bet.
So yeah, Steve Forbes' vibe is Scrooge McDuck if he couldn't swim. And yes, he's into the gold standard, and he does talk about with a couple states in one of his books he mentions now accept gold coins as currency or something like that. So he does specifically love gold.
And he before he gets into politics is like an early obsessive also of the idea of a flat tax, right? How does he get into that, and what is that idea?
Okay, let me. We skipping the college.
If you're a billionaire, I mean, what a nice deal. I mean, if I was a billionaire, I'd be pro flat tax too.
Yeah.
Are we skipping his stuff? Are we skipping his stuff like his college time and all that, and his early career?
We don't have to. We can talk about that.
Yeah, sorry to maybe cut this out, but just because
the flat tax after his dad, but.
Oh, I think it's life before flat tax.
Before flat tax. Okay.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
I'll make a note to edit this.
Yeah, sorry about that.
It's all right.
All good.
So his early life in college, what is he like as a young strapping undergraduate?
So yeah, I actually talked to someone who went to college with him, and it's not too unexpected. He's not a guy you invite to a lot of parties. He runs a financial magazine when you read his Wikipedia, it says it was Business Today, and it became like the largest student-run magazine in the world. But the guy who went to college with him said, like, well, when he ran for president, he claimed that like leftists tried to shut the magazine down. But actually, he said, like, you wouldn't need to shut it down because it had no readers.
Owned. Damn.
Yeah. Do we know what year he went to college? I mean, I know he's much older than us, but I don't know. I can't imagine a widely circulated college magazine. People just being like, let me check out the financials of the.
So he graduates in 1970. So he's in at the peak of the hippie stuff. Like he's in college around the time of the Summer of Love and Woodstock and all that. But meanwhile, he's doing a 75-page long senior thesis titled "The Contest for the 1892 Democratic Presidential Election." Which is amazing. And also, it does make sense that Steve Forbes would be fascinated by Grover Cleveland, another lover of the gold standard, another guy we've talked about on this podcast way too many times. We tend to bring him up in almost every episode. Oh, go ahead.
So he's a Cleveland defender?
Yeah. I haven't read this paper. If we do another episode, I may read this paper if it's available. But Grover Cleveland did basically save the gold standard or keep it going when the Democratic Party was pushing against it. And I have my background. If anyone ever see the video of this, I have William Jennings Bryan's Cross of Gold here. He's another member of the Vanquished we've done. And Steve Forbes is the literal opposite of William Jennings Bryan in every way.
Yes. In terms of their delivery, their politics, their backgrounds. Yeah, very different people. Do you think it's true, though, that the hippies tried to sabotage his Business Today magazine?
According to the guy who went to college with him, no. That he just needed to say that he needed some kind of culture war thing to say. Because in the debates, he only wants to talk about he really wants the campaign just in the flat tax. But they'll ask social questions, and he needs to kind of seem conservative. So he's got to have something to come up with.
Yeah.
I don't know. If you ask me, shutting down his magazine, he would have got off easy. They should have killed this guy. I mean, we got to hear about the gold standard everywhere he goes in college. He's putting out a business magazine. This guy was trouble.
Yeah. And he went to Princeton, right? So there's probably a lot of people like that. I doubt. Yeah, that even at that point, there's probably not a ton of hippies, I would imagine. But I read too that this is, I think, a little later, but he's obsessed with winning this award called the Crystal Owl Award, and it's like a media thing, and most journalists treat it as a joke. It's like a promotional prize for U.S. Steel, and it's just like a bunch of trivia questions. No one actually cares, but Steve treats it like a Pulitzer Prize and relentlessly studies for it. He's won 4 of them, and he like always will bring that up, and like anybody who knows what it is immediately like, oh, that's who cares.
He seems like that kind of guy to care about things no one else cares about.
Yeah.
So he is a huge history nerd, as we talked about. He has different podcasts. Sometimes when he talks about history, and in the Patreon episode we're going to talk about, he even did a podcast on Henry Wallace, our last member of the Vanquished. So there is a chance of all the guys we've done. I think he's the greatest chance of someone who would listen to this podcast.
Really? Okay. So, and I take it he's not a fan of Henry Wallace.
No, not at all. Oh, okay. I'll spoil it. So he compares Joe Biden to Henry Wallace because basically both are appeasers towards Russia.
Really? I had not heard that argument levied at Joe Biden. That's, I guess, refreshing to hear somebody making that point. But speaking of like appeasement and the Cold War, I guess he works with, out of college, Radio Free Europe.
Yes, yeah. So basically, he's a media guy. He wants to be a conservative figure, so he becomes a propagandist. Similar to again, other people we've talked about. and is working for the Board of International Broadcasting and Radio Free Europe. And he does it all the way till 1993. I assume just because the Democrats take over, they hire a Democrat. But maybe him losing that makes him want to run against Bill Clinton in 1996.
Yeah,
I do think Clinton is the one who removed him.
Yeah, I could see him personally being like, "Get that nerd out of here."
But this guy sucks.
Clinton would have destroyed him in the debates. It would have been amazing. This is the level of sex appeal.
I'll sabotage his magazine in college.
Yeah.
This I found interesting too. There's a snippet that comes up later in '96 where an AFL-CIO member says, "You want to get rid of the minimum wage? Why would you want to do that?" And he doesn't have really a response. The only thing he can say is, "Well, I worked very closely with the head of the AFL-CIO when I was in Radio Free Europe, because at the time, AFL-CIO, also known as the AFL-CIA, was like helping, prop up color revolutions and stuff, and propagandizing against the USSR along with Radio Free Europe. So he came back to use that as a defense against critics that he was too anti-union.
See, if I was a billionaire, I would have fun with it. If someone asked me why I wanted to get rid of the minimum wage, I'd say to pay you less. I would just
just go full evil, embrace it, do the top hat.
If you're
talk about
trying
crushing
to
the
get
poor.
if you're trying to get rid of the minimum wage, just fully go for it. Yeah.
He is the kind of guy to draw you a diagram from Economics 101 about how minimum wage is a job killer or whatever.
Right.
And rent control is bad. I remember seeing that stuff in AP Economics back in the day.
Yeah.
Okay, flex, AP Economics.
Oh, I was amazing.
All right.
Nice.
Well, a lot of these AP classes get inundated, with these ideas that are spread by some of these advocacy groups that Forbes supported. That was a big thing he did in his early days, is back groups like Freedom Works. How much of that was he involved with, Fred?
Yeah, he's doing all these different Empower America, Freedom Works. Then he's the chairman for Americans for Hope, Growth, and Opportunity, which is basically his campaign slogans kind of sound like that. And it's a grassroots issues advocacy organization to advance pro-growth, pro-freedom, pro-family issues. So a lot of this stuff is like the kind of stuff that started the Tea Party, where it's like really rich guys running orgs to seem grassroots, that they want lower taxes for rich people. It's all very Orwellian. And the big thing is he loves Ronald Reagan, and Ronald Reagan, a potential Reagan successor to his actual policies, was Jack Kemp. And Steve Forbes, and basically that's the idea of lower taxes, the Laffer curve supply sider. And Steve Forbes basically ends up running to be that kind of version. And he might even be the reason why Jack Kemp becomes Bob Dole's running mate.
Interesting. Yeah. For those who don't know, Jack Kemp originally was a quarterback for the Buffalo Bills, O.J. Simpson's teammate, and goes on to, I would say, do more damage to the world than O.J. Simpson. He's a congressman from upstate New York, Republican, who then becomes Reagan's HUD director, Housing and Urban Development.
Oh, my God.
I honestly, we'll have to do an episode on him at some point, but I honestly think this is that they're that just, sort of racist, that the Reagan administration was like, this guy played football, therefore he hung out with black guys, he can be our public housing secretary. That's the way these people think. And then he would call himself a soul brother and stuff in his political career. But yeah, he was his base was Steve Forbes.
Yeah, and those teams, the entire offense was just Jack Kemp would they'd hike the ball, and Jack Kemp would hand it to OJ, who would run for 2,000 yards in a season. He was not, he was doing very little of the work as the white quarterback of the team.
But he's also friends kind of with Christine Todd Whitman, who's a Republican, but today would be probably a Democrat, right?
Also,
I'd say. Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
I'd say she's kind of maybe a Liz, yeah, she's a bit of a Liz Cheney type Republican, though. No, but on social issues, she's pretty liberal. She's the governor of Jersey in a good part of the 90s. But he's obviously helping her on the tax cut. And I don't think at that point he minds her stance on stuff like abortion, which is not being, no, it's being talked about. But yeah, I don't think he minds her stance on abortion, but obviously then he has to run away from it and say he's pro-life once he's doing the debates.
And they're like friends from childhood. And later on, she runs for the Republican nomination in 2000, and he has to kind of be like, yeah, who? I don't remember her. But around, I guess it's in the Reagan years then that he falls in love with his true love is not his wife, but the concept of a flat tax. That's when is he like first introduced to this thing?
So yeah, so basically, there's something called the Hoover Institute, which of course, the classical liberals, the pro-business people love Hoover, and back in the day before the government did so much, and these guys this guy named Robert Hall and another guy whose name I can't pronounce, they invent the idea of the flat tax as a U.S. public policy in 1985, and I assume Steve Forbes, like the second he hears about it, runs to like hug those guys. And it becomes a big thing. And then, so he doesn't write a book before he runs, as far as I can tell. But then in the 2000s, he writes a book on the flat tax, which is where I got a lot of my information on kind of his flat tax background. And of course, this book has a foreword by member of the Vanquished, Newt Gingrich.
Yes.
What is this book called? What do you title a book on the flat tax?
It is called, The Flat Tax Revolution.
Okay. Yeah. How stupid of me. How could I not do that?
Yeah. And Newt opens the book. He says, the hours we spend on IRS minutia are hours we could spend with family and friends. This assuming Newt has friends, which is not likely. And yeah, they go into a lot of stuff about it. They say, Forbes says, so much time is wasted on tax preparation. It's the equivalent of 3.3 million full-time jobs per year.
Wow. See, that is not a bad point. I have to say that we do waste a ton of time on tax preparation. There's a whole industry of these softwares that are basically scam softwares in a lot of cases. A lot of hidden fees in TurboTax. It's often inaccurate, and people still end up owing money. But that's an argument for doing what some other countries do. I think it's like Micronesia. They just send you a bill every year. They just have their tax department, instead of like knowing the real number and having you guess it, and then you send in your guess, they just give you what you owe, or they give you back money and you don't have to do anything.
Literally, I mean, I just got a notice because I paid back in whatever it was, April tax season. I just got a notice from the state of California. They said, we liked the stab you took at it, but you were off by $400. And I was like, well, if you guys were going to calculate it, why didn't you just do it? I would have paid what you guys said I owed. It's ridiculous.
It's an argument. Yeah, it's a great argument for that, and not just giving everybody the same tax rate. That's an insane solution to this very solvable problem.
It's a very classic conservative thing where they kind of start talking about a problem, and you're like, yeah. And then they give their solution, and you're like, wait, what the fuck? That's no.
Yeah.
So Steve calls he says the federal tax code has grown into a 9 million word multi-headed hydra. And he's the guy to defeat this. And the hydra in Greek mythology was defeated by Hercules. So Steve Forbes is Hercules in this scenario.
Yeah, I see that for him.
Yeah, I don't want to think. I don't want to think about what's under that pinstripe suit, like how ripped he is. Maybe he is really jacked and just keeps it to himself. But Fred, can you explain? I mean, yeah, you're getting to this. What is actually the flat tax, like in economic terms? For dummies? What does it mean?
Yeah, so the way taxes work is like the first 20 or 30,000 you earn, you pay 0%, and then after that, you pay more. It's a progressive tax. You pay more on the additional money you earn over that. Like if you earn, the 30 to 50,000 that you earn, you're paying, let's say, like 10% or some lower percent. But when it keeps going up, and like before Reagan, if you were earning like over a certain amount, all that money was taxed at like 90% or 70%. And then since Reagan, it's been more like 30, 40%. But what Steve wants to do is everyone pays 17% of their whole income. He might exempt like the first 30,000. And that's the only tax. So like capital gains, interest savings, the death tax, all those other things, like, well, you already taxed on your income, you don't have to pay. So it is a tax cut technically for everybody, but it's a humongous tax cut for the rich. And obviously you're like, well, won't that raise the deficit? And yes, it obviously would. But he also wants to cut many federal agencies, and I think we'll get that into more in the debates. But he's basically
he would love to cut some federal agencies.
Yeah. So you end up having to go back to like basically the times of Herbert Hoover. And again, this idea was developed at the Hoover Institute.
Yeah. I mean, why 17? What is special about 17%?
I'm not sure, because one thing with the flat
year that Forbes was founded.
Oh my God.
Knowing him, that would probably be a thing.
Yeah, I have no idea how he came with the number. Because one thing he says is like, well, there is a flat tax even in like the Bible, because like it's called tithing. Tithing is a flat tax, but that's 10%. Also, if he had called it tithing in the campaign, he would have probably done better in Iowa.
That's a good point. So he.
I wish I mean, do we have any kind of like I don't know, footage of or transcripts from him actually being pressed on this stuff? I find this stuff fascinating where I don't know, I can't help but wonder, what is the end game here? Obviously short term, save you and your pals a bunch of money, right? But like, it's obviously, do they want a world where there is no where there's like literally no services, there's no public goods at all? I don't, because that's like all that can exist in this world when you implement these kind of things. I don't quite understand the end game.
Well, there is, so that kind of basing this on the Laffer curve, which is a concept that comes up in the 80s. And this guy, Arthur Laffer, has been pressed on it because his prediction didn't come true. His prediction was that all these people, if you slash taxes, you're going to have more people who pay taxes, and ultimately it'll increase revenue because the economy will be better, and so you're going to have more taxpayers. And he wrote this like on the back of a napkin. It was basically a joke, and it has not come to fruition.
Jesus
he has all
Christ.
sorts of like elaborate justifications for why it actually was a good idea. But that's basically kind of the logic Steve Forbes is working with, I think.
Oh, we're going to get more people to pay taxes. Okay.
Yeah.
Incredible.
Yeah, so the idea with these guys is that if you reduce the high-end taxes, people will have more incentive to do more work. So the rich will do more work and they'll make more money. And it is somewhat of the logic behind the Bush tax cuts. Bush mentions it in the 2000 debate that Steve Forbes was also in. So it never ends up working and you have deficits. It's basically just a scam, and then they want to cut a lot of stuff. And Forbes does get pressed on some details in the debates, but he's only debating Republicans who they do want to cut these agencies, but they find little things to hammer him on. Especially Alan Keyes is in these debates, and he's always hammering people on stuff. Some saying the flat tax doesn't go far enough.
Like it should be as
doesn't go
16.
far enough.
They should do 16%.
Yeah. Oh, the thing is basically, okay, so the flat tax, and now you maybe have heard of the fair tax, but the thing with the flat tax is you still need to have some kind of IRS because you're taxing income. Maybe you could reduce it, and they get into this in the debates a little bit. But there's a thing called the fair tax that's only on spending. So this way the government doesn't take your money. You get to choose what you want to buy. And that's the even more conservative thing that's kind of come later on, and that's actually even more regressive than the flat tax.
Okay. But this is sort of appealing, though. His idea is that tax returns are done via postcard, which is kind of nice.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And there's a book where he's holding up the postcard. Ted Cruz tries to bring this back in 2016. But yeah, people, the idea of filling out your text on a postcard seems really nice. Though even you said in Micronesia or whatever, the government just sends you that postcard, so it can always get easier. But it's a great slogan. And postcards were still kind of cool in 1996.
It is like it's funny timing, because I think I've seen people actually talking about the practical effects of these different kinds of tax, because I think with the elections in France, the left has been talking about what is it, 90% tax on income over $400,000, and people have been posting old studies showing that, like, when we had our tax system set up like that, it was like the most prosperous the country ever was, and all of these it's just like all a complete sham.
Right. Yeah, the Eisenhower years, the marginal rate was like 90%, and by Reagan, that's being slashed. But there's also a push to get rid of this is a great example of branding here. What's something that's called the death tax, which you say that to just about anybody in America, and we'll say, well, that sounds bad, I don't want that. But what that means is the estate tax, or for extremely wealthy people when they die. And so when Malcolm dies, a chunk of his inheritance got taxed before going to Steve. And he is that was a traumatic experience, I guess, for Steve, I'm sure. So he's vehemently opposed to the quote unquote death tax.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And he's they basically try to say, like, he says, like, dying should not be a taxable event. He does, and he does at least point out, that it's not really a tax on those who died, it's a tax on their the people inheriting from them. And it's called the estate tax. I think, well, who's that? The Pole guy, Frank Luntz, invented calling it the death tax. He's also the guy who helped kill Hillary Care by calling it socialized medicine. So he's a real bad guy. He's still around today. And Steve is basically saying that, like, Arthur Laffer actually loved cutting the estate tax. It's the biggest bang for the buck. And Steve says it's reducing our capital stock by 1.5 trillion, whatever that means. I guess that's going from rich people to the government, but he really doesn't like that.
And he says our capital stock. He means the 1%. He's openly like doing billionaire identity politics. He's talking, and there's a quote here against the death tax where he says, "You already paid your taxes when you're alive. You should leave this world unmolested by the IRS." Like, he really is just triggered when you talk about the death tax.
There's no one who loves to victimize themselves more than the wealthy. It's I mean, this is the stuff I'm talking about with the sicko shit, where I just can't imagine my family member dying and receiving a large amount of money and getting a portion of that taken away, and then devoting my entire life to making sure that never happens to anyone ever again.
Yeah, and probably spending way more money on the campaign to do away with it than you would have got, you would have gotten without the tax.
He spends so much money. He spends a lot of money running. That is funny. Unmolested. Yeah, he makes it sound like grave robbing, or he's like, the government is going to come down to your mailroom and make you have oral sex with it.
For the record, this is just a stray quote I saw about Malcolm Forbes being handsy with young men in the mailroom. I don't want to disparage Mr. Forbes. For all I know, if everything was simpatico, but it's also, we're not in the UK, so I can just make up stuff with impunity.
Yeah, go ahead and disparage.
Yeah, he sucked. He and in more ways than one. But he has kind of a weird proposal too for the healthcare system, right, Fred?
Yeah, he wants basically and some of this, I prefer universal healthcare, but some of this kind of works for, like, you get a bunch of money to then spend on healthcare and you have a high deductible, but then if it goes over the amount that you have, then and you get like a catastrophic injury, then stuff is covered. But he does a lot of free market.
Is he one of those guys who want to do like health savings accounts or whatever?
Yeah, he's big on that. And they do have that at Forbes. And the ex-employee I talked to did say it worked kind of well. It may be that what he's proposing with this stuff may be better than a lot of people's health insurance, corporate health insurance now, but it's still way worse than universal health care. And he just
I also have to imagine that the whatever healthcare system they set up at Forbes would probably be much more robust than what he is thinking for the average American. They're trying to attract top talent to come work for them, where they would likely have good health insurance opportunities at other places. But I can't imagine his plan for Americans was a great health system.
Oh yeah, he's going to leave it up to maybe the states, like a governor like Mitt Romney when he did stuff, or just companies, because he's not talking about increasing the size of government, and he's not going to have money for it because he's cutting everybody's taxes, which he will use as a selling point, but also it means the government will have way less money.
And then in 1996 he launches for president, and this is an interesting time where you have Ross Perot, of course, in 92, also runs in 96, and like Steve Forbes, is kind of a quasi populist billionaire, and it's the era of this thing kind of starting, and of course it crystallizes in Trump. People who have no political experience are really rich, like to run their mouths, and they're running for office. And I guess because the Soviet Union has fallen, the billionaire has a new sort of sheen. It's like an exciting thing. It's like it's a powerful thing now, and these guys have a lot more esteem. But what makes Steve Forbes want to run for president in 96?
I think the real thing is, and the debate with his campaign is it a single issue campaign for the flat tax? It's kind of remembered that way. At least in 96, it really seems like that, like how he's talking the debates, where he says the word flat tax pretty much constantly. But he wants to say that it's more than that, and that he actually wants to be president. So it's kind of the question is, did he want to be president? Did he think he have a shot, or did he want to just get the flat tax out there, which he really did succeed in doing, so much that he got to host SNL after he lost. So
right,
we'll get to that.
Wow, Steve Forbes hosted SNL.
Yeah,
absolutely,
yeah.
Absolutely.
This guy really was a precursor to Trump, the like billionaire to, because I mean Trump hosted SNL. This is wild. I'm also like fascinated by that. The 90s were insane in that way, that like post USSR like idolizing of billionaires. It's obviously been a long time. Trump's image has completely changed. That was a guy people like looked up to, and I was on a plane recently, and it was like the last hour, and we were bored, and we were looking at what was available on the TV, and they had Sex and the City, and I said, "You want to watch?" To my girlfriend, I said, "You want to watch the first episode of Sex and the City?" And we're laughing about it. There's a scene where Mr. Big finally comes on. I don't know if you guys are familiar with Sex and the City, but they basically describe him as like they describe him as the next Donald Trump, and they're like, "Ooh."
Oh.
And I was like, holy shit, how far we have come from. It's wild.
Yeah, Mr. Big is basically Donald Trump with the sex appeal of JFK Jr.
Yes, exactly.
Is he also like a moron? Like, does he run the business, or is he just a figurehead in the show?
He's like, that's the thing. No one goes into their like actual work. He's more just like, he's like business Ken doll. He just kind of is always like, I'm running numbers. The
character's played as intelligent. Because Carrie's obviously, you would agree, Carrie's like very smart, and he's like her intellectual match. So he's playing intelligent as well. I don't know if JFK Jr. or Donald Trump was intelligent, but I think people would like to think that they were in 1999, maybe.
Dude, imagine because JFK Jr. studied acting, imagine if he had lived and had a role in Sex and the City. I think there's a world where that happens. He would be perfect. He would be like a great,
incredible.
Yeah,
highest rated
That's the
HBO
other
show
thing.
of all time.
I mean, that was like, I don't know. It probably premiered in like 98 or 99. And it was so many of the guys, they always run down their pedigree. They'd be like, I have a date with so-and-so. He's, you know, Wall Street. And they're all just like obsessed with everyone's hot shit New York job.
Mm-hmm.
Different time.
That shows about people who live in New York but refuse to take the subway or go to the outer boroughs.
Yes.
Right. This is when Manhattan was still cool, honestly. But 1996, I mean, it is interesting, the billionaire thing, because I feel like Trump kind of got the permutations right, because you had a few attempts at Trump before Trump that weren't really serious. I mean, I guess he wasn't really serious either. But Ross Perot is like a wacky guy, a billionaire who's able to generate a lot of attention, but he runs third-party independent, and he's kind of doomed with that tactic. Although, we talked about maybe he could have won in 92. But then you have Steve Forbes, who's running in the primaries like Trump does, but unlike Trump, has just zero charisma and is like just not interesting at all. And Trump had that right combination of political smarts and buffoonery that to keep the eyeballs gone that Forbes maybe didn't. But in 96, right, with the end of the Clintons' first term, he's comes in. People think change is happening. Doesn't really do too much. Kind of has given up in many respects by 96. He's doing things like welfare reform, taking Republican issues from Republicans, which is very frustrating for them. And
it takes a Democrat, you know?
Yeah. Yep. Indeed. And you have Gingrich, Speaker of the House, moving the country, even, trying to move things even more to the right. And that puts the Republicans in kind of a precarious position at the national level, because you don't want to go too extreme. Gingrich is really unpopular, the things he's doing. But also you have to have something to counter Bill Clinton, and what they end up with Bob Dole. There's like very little difference between their actual platforms. So in those primaries, I guess Steve Forbes maybe sees an opening as like somebody who's has this proposal, which is not a very exciting proposal in the grand scheme of things, but is at least a proposal that's different from the rest of the Republicans and different from Clinton. And he is able to do better than people expect, given that he has zero political experience at that point.
Can I ask a question just about the 96
Sure.
the 96 primary? I'm not as well versed. So how many people, like how many serious candidates are there for the Republican?
We're gonna get into this.
Oh, okay.
I've watched every 96 primary debate.
God.
So we've got I know way too much about Lamar Alexander, who I think finished fourth. So let me say about Trump. So what Trump does is, honestly, a lot of the Trump stuff comes from this you could see it in this campaign. Trump is just Steve Forbes plus Pat Buchanan. So Trump is the billionaire. It's inherited wealth. He's kind of, off-putting, whatever. But then he's saying exactly what Pat Buchanan says. At some point in the debates, they're even talking about the idea of building a wall. Buchanan is more honest and says fence a lot of the time. But so Donald Trump is just Steve Forbes plus Pat Buchanan plus like a reality TV, entertainingness.
I'm also, I don't know how much I want to give Trump credit for like running the right campaign. I feel like so much of it is like timing, where like Trump, I mean, we all remember 2012 where we like laughed at it and we were like, okay, great, you're a goofy fucking asshole, get the fuck out of here. By the time 2016 rolled around, it was like, we had gotten 2 terms of Obama and people felt, pretty seriously disheartened, and we're like, you guys are just going to give us Hillary Clinton. They didn't take Trump seriously. And I think it was just like a perfect timing for Trump. I think he should have just been another fucking goofy, dumb billionaire who we laughed out. He should have been just a guy you guys talked about on your show, honestly.
So
Yeah.
But instead, there was no one to, there was no one to like meet that, and now we're stuck in this absolute hell.
So I'm not. I don't give him credit. The general was closed. It's whatever. There's a lot of crap. He just ran a really, really good Republican primary campaign in 2015, 2016. And that's sort of it. Like basically Steve Forbes plus Pat Buchanan could win a Republican primary. And that's kind of what Trump did. But as far as anything else, no, he's terrible. It's unpopular. Yeah, all that. It's just that he won the primaries in 2016 was his big claim to fame to me.
I mean, those primaries were fun. I mean, remember when he's just fucking dunking on every dude on the stage? I mean, it's incredible.
Man, that's my big lament about this time not doing those debates again. That would have been so much more entertaining if you had Trump there.
Oh, yeah. And he's going like, they're all booing me because they're donors. They hate me.
Yeah.
Little Marco Rubio has ended up on his short list for possible VP. So there is a chance. When you're listening to this, you probably know it didn't happen. It's probably like JD Vance or Doug Burgum. But there is some chance Marco Rubio gets on the ticket and we get to do a Marco Rubio Vanquished where we go into all that.
Yeah. We'll have to do him at some point, man. Yeah. So in the mid 90s, the front runner, before anything begins, before anyone announces, is Colin Powell on the Republican side. There's like an actual chance that he could run and win, and the Clinton campaign is actually worried about Powell. He's, a war hero and very moderate, and he could, and that's a counterfactual I think about a lot actually, is what if Colin Powell had run and won, and you may have like totally re-scrambled the sort of the partisan landscape in America, because the first black president, maybe that would have sort of mixed, and at that point too, Clinton's winning in the South, so maybe Republican and Democratic parties would be completely different today, but he didn't, because his wife was essentially like, I think you're going to get shot, so please don't do it.
Jesus Christ.
Yeah. So the early favorite is Bob Dole, who of course ends up getting the nomination, but it's tougher going than people think. He is given a run for his money here and there from people like Steve Forbes a little bit, and then as you mentioned, Pat Buchanan runs again. He ran in 92. We're definitely doing an episode on him soon.
Oh my God.
But and you also have discontent over NAFTA, which Buchanan is tapping into, and it's a huge vacuum, really, because nobody runs against NAFTA really until Trump or free trade. And on both sides, you have GOPs talking about being austerians and paying off the debt, balancing the budget, but Clinton is doing the same thing. It's and he's doing that. It's good for the bond markets, but that's really the only tangible benefit economically. But again, he's taking a Republican issue and they're like, what are we going to run on? We don't know. So enter Steve Forbes. He, in Iowa, I guess there's a viral image before that was a thing of him eating a cheeseburger. Did you see this?
Oh, it's
Freddie?
it's a 7-minute YouTube video. Oh, it's great. Please go watch this. Steve Forbes eats a cheeseburger. He goes to McDonald's in Iowa. I guess he's trying to pretend like it's random, but like there's so much cameras. It's like clearly just a TV shoot. He's saying all kinds of weird things. Like he says, this meal is my hors d'oeuvre. And he orders, this is what Steve Forbes orders at McDonald's. It's not a bad order, honestly. Cheeseburger, milkshake, and coffee. It's known as the Energizer.
Huh.
Jesus.
Okay. That's his order.
Oh yeah, the Energizer. Oh yeah, the Energizer Bunny was a big celebrity in 1996, I believe. Still, yeah. So this was
Oh sure, yeah.
Then he takes the change after he orders, and he's a billionaire. You're not supposed to be taking like a little bit of change, and I think he gives it to a guy to like give it back off camera. Like there's a little bit of awkwardness about that.
Wow.
As well, and then there might be a lag, but And then people say, well, like, has so many people ever watched you eat? And he makes a joke. If I spill my coffee, I'll have witnesses and I can sue because the McDonald's hot coffee thing has happened. And I think tort reform is the thing the Republicans are supporting in these debates.
Yes, that is a huge issue for the Republicans, tort reform, and they bring it up at the RNC that year. They're complaining about trial lawyers. They're saying all the Clinton administration's in the pocket of trial lawyers, and a lot of this is because of the hot coffee lawsuit, which made headlines because, this woman spilled McDonald's over hot coffee that she spilled on herself. But what the press didn't really report is that there were like third-degree burns from this. It was like scalding hot coffee that they shouldn't have been serving, and she had like serious medical problems after that. But at that point, people talk about misinformation and fake news today, but at that point, you could have things like that circulate, and there'd be like no pushback that would enter people's consciousness. So that becomes a Republican issue, just like the anti-lawyer politics.
Absolutely. Yeah. Propaganda is as old as this country. Yeah. What do you think? Common Sense by Thomas Paine was propaganda. I have seen that hot coffee doc, and it's really gross what happened to her. And I'm sure McDonald's could afford to pay her. She got some money, but she had medical bills. I don't think it was a big deal to their bottom line to pay this poor woman.
That makes sense though for billionaires to take up that issue. You know, what if we start having to pay out of pocket for any of the times that our products hurt customers? This could be a real problem.
Yeah. But I guess after this meal, though, he's gets offended that people say it's staged and like he doesn't actually eat McDonald's all the time, right?
Yeah, he says, no, it's not staged. Even though, again, the video opens with 1 million cameras. You already know it's staged based on watching the video. He says, no, just a candidate who needs a quick meal and knows where he can get it.
Thank you for tuning in to this episode of The Vanquished. If you want the full thing, because there is more, please go to patreon.com/thevanquished, where you can get the rest of this episode as well as our full episode catalog. You can support our work as well as annoy us in the comments.